She fought her way out of Detroit projects and became the supreme diva of Motown. Diana Ross got the golden dream, but she paid for it with friends, family, and a loneliness that glitter could never hide. The gowns sparkled, the crowds roared, but Diana Ross always saw the bill. She survived as a diva, but survival meant losing almost everything except the crown itself. You can't just sit there and wait for people to give you that golden dream. You've got to get it yourself. Diana Ross said this early in her career, and she lived it, clawed her way from Detroit housing projects to become the face of Motown. The most successful female group leader in history, a solo superstar, an Oscar-nominated actress, a cultural icon whose influence shaped generations of black female artists who came after. She got the golden dream, but the price was higher than anyone outside could see. Friendships destroyed, a group torn apart, decades of being called ruthless and selfish, and a loneliness that fame and success could never quite fill. At 80, Diana Ross is still performing, still wearing spectacular gowns, still commanding stages with the glamour that made her a legend. But there's something elegiac about these performances, as if she's simultaneously celebrating and mourning a past that grows more distant with each passing year. The world sees glamour. Diana saw the price tag, and she's been paying it for 60 years. Being a diva is about survival. She said this too, and it's perhaps the most revealing statement of her career. Not that being a diva is about talent or beauty or success, about survival. As if the glamour and the commanding presence and the refusal to be diminished were all armor. Protection against a world that wanted to consume her, that demanded everything while giving back admiration mixed with resentment, success shadowed by scandal, triumph tainted by tragedy. Is it possible to be the most successful and also the most resented? Can you win everything you fought for and still lose what mattered most? And when ambition destroys the relationships that made success possible, was the ambition worth it? Or does the question miss the point entirely because survival doesn't care about worth, only about continuing to exist? Detroit, Michigan, March 26, 1944. Diane Ernestine Earl Ross was born into a working-class black family struggling through the tail end of the Depression and the challenges of wartime America. Her parents separated when she was young, and her mother, Ernestine, worked multiple jobs to support 6 children. They lived in the Brewster Douglas housing projects, massive public housing towers that were home to thousands of black families trying to survive in a Detroit that offered limited opportunities despite its industrial prosperity. The projects were tough. Poverty, crime, the constant struggle to maintain dignity in circumstances designed to strip it away. But they were also full of life, of community, of people supporting each other because they had to. Young Diana learned early that if she wanted anything beyond what the projects offered, she'd have to fight for it herself. Nobody was going to hand her anything. The world wasn't set up to give black girls from housing projects golden dreams. She'd have to take hers. Could this early experience, growing up with nothing, fighting for every opportunity, learning that survival meant being willing to do whatever it took, have created both Diana's incredible drive and the ruthlessness that would later destroy friendships? When you grow up knowing nobody's going to give you anything, does fighting for yourself become so ingrained that you can't stop even when you should? She discovered singing as a teenager, joining a group called the Primettes with friends Mary Wilson and Florence Ballard, along with Betty McGlown, who would soon be replaced by Barbara Martin. They sang at local venues, talent shows, anywhere that would have them, perfecting harmonies and choreography, dreaming of making it big. They were good, really good, with Florence's powerful voice, Mary's steady presence, and Diana's distinctive sound that was thinner than Florence's but somehow more piercing, more memorable. In 1960, they auditioned for Berry Gordy's Motown Records, the label that was beginning to transform black music and prove that the sound of young America could come from Detroit. Gordy was initially unimpressed. They were young, raw, needed development. But he saw potential, especially in Diana, whose ambition was visible, whose hunger to succeed matched his own. He signed them, changed their name to the Supremes, and set about molding them into stars. The early years with the Supremes were hard. They released singles that went nowhere, struggled to find their sound, were called the no-hit Supremes around Motown. But Gordy kept believing in them, kept working with them, and gradually something began to click. The songwriting team of Holland Dozier Holland found the formula: sophisticated pop with soul underpinnings, lyrics about love and heartbreak that teenage girls could relate to, melodies that were instantly memorable. In 1964, everything changed. Where Did Our Love Go hit #1, followed by Baby Love, then Come See About Me. 3 #1s in a row. Suddenly, the Supremes weren't struggling anymore. They were stars, the biggest female group in the world, the face of Motown's crossover success. Between 1964 and 1969, they would score 12 #1 hits, a record for an American group that still stands. But success created tensions that would eventually tear the group apart. Berry Gordy had decided early that Diana would be the lead singer, the face of the group. This made commercial sense. Her voice was distinctive, her stage presence commanding, her ambition and professionalism matching Gordy's vision for what Motown could be. But it meant Florence and Mary were increasingly relegated to background roles, singing backup while Diana took spotlight. Florence Ballard especially resented this. She'd been the group's original lead singer, had the most powerful voice, felt she deserved equal prominence. As Diana's star rose, Florence felt herself being erased, becoming just a Supreme rather than a third of the Supremes. The resentment festered, complicated by Florence's struggles with alcohol and depression, by feeling trapped in a role that diminished her while elevating Diana. Mary Wilson tried to maintain peace, to hold the group together, but she also felt the sting of being overshadowed. She understood the business reasons for making Diana the star, but understanding didn't make it hurt less when audiences chanted Diana's name while barely noticing her and Florence standing behind. And Diana was focused on success, on making the most of the opportunity Motown was giving her. She worked relentlessly, perfecting her performance, her image, her ability to command a stage. If that meant Mary and Florence felt overshadowed, if that meant friendships became strained, that was the price of success. She'd grown up with nothing. She wasn't going to apologize for fighting to keep the something she'd earned. Behind all that glamour, the matching gowns, the perfectly synchronized choreography, the smiling unity they projected on stage, was there unbearable tension nobody saw. When success makes you choose between ambition and loyalty, between your own rise and your friends' feelings, is there any choice that doesn't leave casualties? The relationship between Diana Ross and Berry Gordy was one of the most important and complicated in Motown history. It began as professional mentorship, Gordy recognizing Diana's potential and nurturing it, Diana absorbing his lessons about performance and professionalism and the business of music. But it evolved into something more complex: romantic relationship, power dynamic, creative partnership, mutual ambition feeding off each other. They were never officially a couple in any conventional sense. Gordy was married when their relationship began, and both were always somewhat secretive about the personal nature of their connection. But everyone at Motown knew they were involved, that Diana had Gordy's favor in ways that went beyond just professional recognition. In 1971, Diana married music executive Robert Ellis Silberstein in a move that seemed to settle questions about her personal life. But that same year, she gave birth to a daughter, Rhonda Suzanne. The timing was complicated, the paternity even more so. Rhonda was officially Robert Silberstein's daughter, raised as his child, loved as his own. But biologically, she was Berry Gordy's, a secret that would eventually emerge but remained carefully guarded for years, adding another layer of complexity to an already tangled relationship. Then in 1972, Diana had another daughter, Tracy Ellis Ross, whose biological father was confirmed to be Robert Silberstein. But by then, the marriage was already strained by Diana's career demands, by the ghost of Berry Gordy that haunted their relationship, by the impossibility of being married to a woman who belonged more to her ambition than to any person. They would divorce in 1977, and Diana would go on to have 3 more children, Chudney, Ross, and Evan, from her second marriage to Norwegian shipping magnate Arne Næss Jr. But it was Berry Gordy who remained the constant gravitational force in Diana's professional life. He produced her solo albums, guided her film career, opened doors that might have remained closed. The relationship gave Diana access and opportunities that Mary and Florence didn't have. She could go directly to Motown's founder, could influence decisions, could advocate for herself in ways that seemed unfair to the other Supremes. Was Diana sleeping her way to the top, or making strategic personal and professional choices that happened to align? The question itself reveals more about attitudes toward female ambition than about Diana. Male artists who maintained relationships with powerful executives were called smart networkers. Female artists doing the same were called opportunists. Diana navigated this impossible terrain, needing Gordy's support but resenting being seen as his creation, benefiting from their connection while being diminished by it. But the relationship also trapped Diana in ways that would last decades. She was forever linked to Gordy, forever suspected of owing her success more to their relationship than to her talent. Every opportunity she got, every role she was offered, every solo hit, all of it was shadowed by whispers that Berry had made it happen, that Diana Ross was a creation of Berry Gordy rather than an artist in her own right. Even her Oscar nomination for Lady Sings the Blues was tainted by suggestions that Gordy had produced the film specifically for Diana, that the role was a gift rather than something she'd earned. The truth, as always, was more complex. Yes, Gordy opened doors for Diana, but she was the one who walked through them, who worked relentlessly to justify his faith in her, who transformed opportunities into achievements. Berry Gordy didn't make Diana Ross a star. He recognized she could be one and created circumstances where her talent could flourish. The confusion between recognition and creation, between providing opportunity and creating talent, would haunt Diana's legacy forever. By 1967, the tensions in the Supremes were unsustainable. Florence Ballard's drinking had increased, her reliability had decreased, and her resentment toward Diana had become obvious. Berry Gordy made a decision. Florence was out. She was replaced by Cindy Birdsong, and the Supremes continued. Florence received a settlement, inadequate given her contributions, and was essentially erased from the group's public narrative. In 1970, Motown made it official. The group would be renamed Diana Ross and the Supremes for their final performances, acknowledging what had always been true. This was Diana's group, and the others were supporting players. Then, in January 1970, Diana performed her final show with the Supremes and launched her solo career. The most successful female group in history was over, and Diana Ross, just Diana, no longer Supreme, was stepping into an uncertain future. Mary Wilson was bitter about the breakup, feeling Diana had prioritized solo ambition over group loyalty, that she'd broken up something magical for personal gain. She'd spent decades telling her version of the story, writing books that portrayed Diana as ruthlessly ambitious, willing to destroy friendships and partnerships to get what she wanted. Diana's perspective was different. She'd been the lead singer, the face, the one Berry and Motown had invested in most heavily. Going solo wasn't betrayal, it was natural evolution. Why should she be limited by a group format when she could be a solo star? Why should loyalty to Mary and Florence matter more than her own career possibilities? She'd fought too hard to get out of the Detroit projects to be held back by anyone, even people she'd started with. Did going solo mark Diana's liberation or her final isolation? When you break apart the thing that made you successful to pursue even greater success, and you achieve that success but lose the relationships that mattered, have you won or lost? Diana's solo career started with a string of hits. Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Touch Me in the Morning, Theme from Mahogany. She proved she didn't need the Supremes, that Diana Ross alone could be a star. But there was something lonely about those performances now. Diana on stage by herself without Mary and Florence flanking her, without the unity and sisterhood they'd projected even when it was becoming fiction. Then came 1972 and Lady Sings the Blues, a biopic about Billie Holiday that gave Diana a chance to prove she was more than just a pop singer. She threw herself into the role with the same ferocious ambition she'd brought to everything else, studying Holiday's life and music, embodying the pain and addiction and brilliance of one of jazz's greatest and most tragic figures. Her performance was remarkable. Not technically perfect, perhaps, but emotionally truthful in ways that transcended technical concerns. Diana understood something about the price of stardom, about being a black woman performing for audiences that simultaneously worshipped and diminished you, about the loneliness of being celebrated while feeling profoundly isolated. She brought that understanding to Holiday, and the result earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. But there was also something almost too personal about her performance, as if Diana was channeling not just Holiday's tragedy, but sensing her own future. The way fame consumes the famous, the way success can be its own kind of prison, the way people love your talent while resenting your humanity. She was playing Billie Holiday, but perhaps also warning herself about where her own path might lead. Through the 1970s, Diana established herself as a multimedia star. Music, film, television specials, fashion icon. She dated celebrities, married twice, maintained the glamour that had become her trademark. She was living the dream, the absolute pinnacle of what a black girl from Detroit housing projects could achieve in America. But the relationships that had been destroyed to get there couldn't be repaired. Florence Ballard's life had gone into free fall after leaving the Supremes in 1967. The settlement Motown gave her was inadequate, approximately $139,804, to $804, a pittance compared to what she'd helped generate for the label. She'd signed away her rights to royalties, her future, her identity as a Supreme. Within months, the money was gone, mismanaged by lawyers and advisors who saw an easy target in a young woman who'd never been taught to protect herself. Florence tried to launch a solo career, but without Motown's machinery behind her, without Berry Gordy's belief, without the platform that Diana still commanded, she couldn't gain traction. The recordings she made were good. Her voice was still powerful, still capable of the emotion that had once anchored the Supremes. But good wasn't enough without promotion, without belief, without the infrastructure that made hits happen. She married and had 3 daughters, tried to build a normal life away from the spotlight that had consumed her. But normal was impossible when you'd once been supreme, when you'd tasted success at the highest level only to have it ripped away. The alcohol that had started as social drinking, as a way to cope with the pressure of being overshadowed by Diana, became something darker, a way to forget what she'd lost, to numb the pain of watching her former group continue without her, to escape the reality that she was living on welfare while Diana Ross became a superstar. By the mid-1970s, Florence was broke, struggling, her health deteriorating from years of drinking and the depression that drinking couldn't cure. She'd tried to sue Motown, claiming she'd been forced out of the group unfairly, that she deserved more compensation. The lawsuit went nowhere. She couldn't afford adequate legal representation, and Motown's lawyers buried her claims in paperwork and delays until she gave up. On February 22, 1976, Florence Ballard was found dead in her Detroit home at age 32. The official cause was cardiac arrest, but everyone knew alcohol had killed her. Slowly, painfully, destroying her heart just as surely as rejection and failure had destroyed her spirit. She died poor, her talent wasted, her potential unfulfilled. Her daughters left without a mother because the music industry had chewed her up and spit her out. Diana attended the funeral, arriving in a limousine that seemed almost obscene given Florence's poverty at death. She wore black, maintained her composure, said the right things. But her presence was complicated by what it represented. She was the success story while Florence was the cautionary tale. She'd risen while Florence had fallen, and whether Diana bore responsibility for that fall was a question that would never have a universally accepted answer. Some saw Diana as having stolen Florence's place in destiny, as having actively participated in pushing Florence out to secure her own position. Others saw Florence as unable to handle the pressures of the business that Diana had navigated successfully, as someone whose talent couldn't overcome personal demons. Diana herself rarely spoke about Florence publicly, maintaining the distance and composure that had always been her armor. But those close to her say Florence's death haunted Diana, that the guilt, deserved or not, never quite left, that seeing what ambition cost someone else made Diana question, however briefly, what it had cost her. Can anyone reach the top without leaving casualties behind? Or is the very nature of the top that it's a solitary peak, that getting there requires leaving people behind? That success at that level is incompatible with the relationships that make life meaningful. I lived the dream everyone wanted, but I often woke up alone. Diana said this years later, and it captures something essential about her life's trajectory. She'd achieved everything she'd fought for, reached heights most people never approach. But the price was isolation, from the friends she'd started with, from normal relationships untainted by fame and power dynamics, from being able to trust that people loved her for herself rather than for what she represented or could provide. The 1980s brought continued success. Upside Down and I'm Coming Out were huge hits that proved Diana could evolve with changing musical styles, could remain relevant in the disco and early MTV era. Upside Down topped the Billboard Hot 100 in 1980, produced by Chic's Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards, giving Diana a contemporary sound that reached new audiences while maintaining the sophistication that had always been her trademark. I'm Coming Out became an anthem, especially within the LGBTQ+ community, though Diana claimed she hadn't intended it as a gay liberation statement. The song was about personal freedom, about stepping into yourself without apology, themes that resonated across communities seeking visibility and acceptance. Diana performed it with joy, with freedom, with the kind of uninhibited celebration that seemed almost at odds with the controlled perfection that characterized most of her career. But success in the 1980s came with new complications. Diana was now in her 40s, navigating an industry increasingly focused on youth. MTV was reshaping popular music, prioritizing visual spectacle and youthful energy. Diana adapted, creating elaborate music videos, maintaining the glamorous image that had always been her calling card. But there was something increasingly brittle about the perfection, as if maintaining the Diana Ross persona required more effort with each passing year. The diva reputation intensified during this period. Stories circulated about Diana being difficult to work with, about her demanding impossible standards from backup singers and musicians, about her refusal to be upstaged or diminished in any way. Some incidents became legendary, like the time she reportedly pushed Mary Wilson during a Motown reunion performance, asserting her dominance even in moments meant to celebrate shared history. There was the infamous 1983 Central Park concert, where Diana performed for an estimated 400,000 people in a free show that was supposed to raise money for a playground. The first night was rained out after just 35 minutes, forcing a rescheduled performance the next day. Diana's handling of the chaos, Her insistence on performing through dangerous weather, her theatrical announcements about the situation, fed narratives about her ego and control issues. But it also demonstrated her commitment to the performance, her refusal to disappoint audiences, her belief that the show must go on regardless of circumstances. Diana remained a glamorous presence in pop culture throughout the decade, performing at major venues, making television appearances, maintaining her status as a living legend. But there were also signs of strain, reports of diva behavior, of Diana being difficult to work with, of her demanding perfection from everyone around her while showing little patience for human frailty. Some of this was probably true. Success and decades of being catered to can make anyone difficult. Some of it was probably exaggerated. The same behavior that makes male stars demanding makes female stars difficult. And Diana was navigating this double standard while also being black in an industry that had complicated relationships with black female power. There were also private struggles with alcohol, though these were kept mostly hidden from public view. The pressure of maintaining the Diana Ross image, always glamorous, always in control, always the diva, was exhausting. Drinking helped ease that pressure, helped her relax, helped her forget the loneliness and the price she'd paid. It never became a public scandal the way Florence's drinking had, but friends knew Diana struggled, that the glamour was sometimes maintained through effort that required substances to sustain. The irony wasn't lost on those close to her. Diana had survived where Florence hadn't. But survival meant carrying some of the same demons while maintaining the illusion that she was invulnerable. Her relationship with her children was complicated by her career demands. She was a devoted mother by her own account, fiercely protective of her 5 children, Rhonda, Tracy, Chudney, Ross, and Evan. But being Diana Ross meant constant touring, recording, public appearances. The children grew up with a mother who was simultaneously there and not there, present but consumed by the demands of being an icon. Tracy Ellis Ross, who would grow up to become a successful actress herself, starring in shows like Girlfriends and Blackish, has spoken about growing up as Diana Ross's daughter with both pride and complexity. She inherited her mother's presence, her charisma, her ability to command attention. But she also inherited the complicated legacy, the pressure of a famous last name, the challenge of being seen for herself rather than as Diana's daughter, the understanding that success came with costs that weren't immediately visible. Tracy learned early that Diana Ross, the mother, and Diana Ross, the icon, were sometimes 2 different people. The mother could be warm, loving, supportive, attending school events when her schedule allowed, creating moments of normalcy within an abnormal life. But the icon was always there too, the persona that couldn't fully come off even at home, the need to maintain certain standards and appearances that sometimes made intimacy difficult. The revelation that Rhonda's biological father was Berry Gordy rather than Robert Silberstein came years after Rhonda's childhood, adding another layer of complication to an already complex family dynamic. Rhonda had grown up believing Silberstein was her father, had formed her identity around that understanding. Learning the truth as an adult meant reconsidering everything she'd believed about her origins, her family, her mother's choices. Diana had kept the secret to protect Rhonda, to give her a stable family structure, to avoid the scandal that would have erupted if the truth had been known earlier. But protection through deception has its own costs, its own betrayals. All 5 children had to navigate what it meant to be Diana Ross's child. The privileges and pressures, the doors that opened and the expectations that came with them. The challenge of finding their own identities while carrying a name that meant something specific to the world. Diana loved them fiercely, but love filtered through fame and ambition is different from love that has space to breathe, to be imperfect, to exist without the weight of public scrutiny. By the 1990s and 2000s, Diana was increasingly seen as a legend from the past rather than a current force. She still toured, still performed, still commanded substantial fees and audiences. But the hits had stopped coming. The cultural relevance had faded. She was the Motown diva, the supreme, a living monument to an era that was growing more distant. The relationship with Mary Wilson never fully healed. They appeared together occasionally over the decades, a 1983 Motown 25th anniversary special where tensions were visible despite the smiles, various attempted reunions that never quite captured what the Supremes had once been. They maintained public civility, said nice things about each other in interviews when required, performed together when the money and occasion demanded it. But the underlying resentment never quite disappeared. Mary continued to tell her version of the Supreme's story, writing multiple books. Dream Girl, My Life as a Supreme in 1986, Supreme Faith, Someday We'll Be Together in 1990, that portrayed Diana as ruthlessly ambitious, willing to destroy friendships and partnerships to get what she wanted. Mary presented herself as the loyal one, the one who'd wanted to keep the group together, the one who'd been betrayed by Diana's solo ambitions and Berry Gordy's favoritism. Diana rarely responded directly to Mary's narratives, maintaining the dignified distance that had always been her default. When she did address the breakup, it was to say she'd been the lead singer, the face, the one Motown had invested in most heavily. Going solo hadn't been betrayal, it had been natural evolution, the logical next step for someone who'd outgrown the group format. Why should loyalty to Mary and Florence matter more than her own career possibilities? She'd fought too hard to get out of the Detroit projects to be held back by anyone, even people she'd started with. The two women circled each other for decades, never quite enemies but never quite friends, bound by shared history but separated by fundamentally different understandings of what had happened and who bore responsibility. Diana had won the career battle. She was the superstar, the legend, the one whose name everyone knew. But Mary had won something else, the moral high ground, the narrative of being the wronged party, the sympathy that comes from being the one left behind. In 2000, there was a highly publicized Return to Love tour. Diana, Mary, and original Supreme Cindy Birdsong performing together for the first time in decades. But the reunion was troubled from the start. Arguments over money, over billing, over who would sing which parts. The tour was eventually canceled mid-run, with various parties blaming various factors, but everyone knew the real problem. Some breakups are so thorough that reunion is impossible. Some damage so deep that decades can't heal it. In February 2021, Mary Wilson died unexpectedly at age 76 in her Las Vegas home, just days after announcing a new book deal and making plans for future performances. The cause was sudden cardiac arrest, her heart simply stopping in the night. The news shocked the music world. Mary had seemed healthy, still active, still performing, still telling the Supreme story her way. Diana's public response was brief, posted on social media. I just woke up to this news. My condolences to you, Mary's family. I am reminded that each day is a gift. I have so many wonderful memories of our time together. The Supremes will live on in our hearts. The message was criticized as cold, as insufficient tribute to a woman Diana had sung with for over a decade. But perhaps it was simply Diana being Diana, controlled, measured, maintaining the distance that had protected her for 60 years, even in grief. Mary's death meant Diana was now one of the last Supremes standing. The only original member still performing, still touring, still carrying the legacy. Florence was gone. Dead at 32 from the demons Diana had somehow survived. Mary was gone, having spent decades resenting the friend who'd become a superstar while she remained in the shadow. Now Diana was alone with the legacy, the only one left to tell the story, the only one who remembered what it felt like when they were three girls from Detroit harmonizing in the projects, dreaming of making it big, not knowing that making it big would tear them apart. Were these final losses? Florence's tragic death, Mary's unhealed resentment, the inevitable price of Diana's survival? Or could there have been another path, one where ambition didn't require such complete sacrifice of the relationships that had made the journey possible in the first place? Today at 80, Diana continues to perform occasionally, still wearing spectacular gowns, still projecting the glamour that made her a legend. But these performances feel elegiac, as if she's simultaneously celebrating and mourning a past that grows more distant. The audiences are older now, people who remember when the Supremes were the biggest group in the world, when Diana Ross going solo was major news, when she was at the absolute pinnacle of success rather than a legend trading on past glories. She was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, received Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, earned Kennedy Center honors. All the awards and recognition that signify legendary status, that say your contributions were important, that your place in history is secure. But awards don't fill the lonely hours, don't replace the friendships destroyed in pursuit of success, don't answer the question of whether it was all worth it. The legacy Diana Ross leaves is massive and complicated. She was one of the first black female superstars to achieve genuine crossover success in a deeply segregated music industry. She proved black women could be glamorous and successful and command mainstream audiences. She opened doors for Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, Beyoncé. Every black female pop star who came after owes something to Diana's success and the path she helped create. But her legacy is also shadowed by the costs. Florence dead at 32, a group torn apart, decades of being called difficult and diva and ruthless. Whether Diana was a trailblazer who did what she needed to survive and succeed, or an ambitious woman who destroyed friendships in pursuit of solo glory, depends on your perspective and probably your opinions about female ambition, about success, about what loyalty means and whether it should limit individual achievement. The world saw glamour, I saw the price tag. Diana said this looking back on her career, and it's perhaps the most honest statement she's ever made publicly. The glamour was real. She was spectacular, commanding, a genuine star whose presence could transform any stage. But the price was also real. Relationships destroyed, friendships lost, loneliness that fame and success couldn't fill. Decades of being resented for the very ambition that made her successful. She's still alive at 80, still occasionally performing, still being Diana Ross. The diva who fought her way out of Detroit housing projects to become the most successful female group leader in history, who went solo and proved she didn't need anyone, who won every professional battle while losing most of the personal relationships that might have made the victories meaningful. The Supreme Diva. The lonely queen. The woman who got everything she fought for and spent 60 years discovering that everything isn't quite enough when you're standing at the top alone, when the people you started with are gone or estranged, when the crown you fought so hard to win turns out to be heavier than you expected and impossible to take off. A diva survives, as Diana said. But survival isn't the same as thriving. Isn't the same as happiness, isn't the same as feeling that the price you paid was worth what you received. Diana Ross survived. She's still surviving, still performing, still being the legend. But whether she's living or just remembering what it felt like to be alive before the price became clear, that's a question only she could answer. And she spent 60 years maintaining enough glamour and distance that nobody gets close enough to ask. Diana Ross won the crown. But sometimes the crown is lonelier than the climb. The golden dream she fought so hard to get, she got it. But the bill kept coming year after year, friendship after friendship, until all that remained was the glamour and the loneliness and the question nobody dares ask. Was it worth it? Can survival ever be enough when you've sacrificed everything else to achieve it? The lights still shine on Diana Ross. The gowns still sparkle, the voice still commands. But in the quiet moments between performances, when the crowds have gone home and the applause has faded, Does she ever wonder what might have been different if she'd chosen loyalty over ambition, friendship over success, warmth over the cold perfection of being supreme? We'll never know. Diana Ross doesn't answer those questions. She just keeps performing, keeps surviving, keeps being the diva who taught us that ambition is armor and survival is everything. Even when survival costs you everyone you started with, everyone who knew you before you became Diana Ross, everyone who might have loved you for something other than the crown you wear. She got the golden dream, and she's still paying for it.